Today we're doing another gunsmithing video. We're going to be working on this combination gun here. Now this is a Carrero and Astelarra combination gun under over. It's a 20 gauge 22 long rifle, and I bought it recently for $99 because the rifle firing pin is broken. So what we're going to do today is replace, manufacture and replace the firing pin. Right, so this is a simple break action under and over combination gun. The barrel which fires is just selected by that little selector there, and other than that, it's basically a similar to most other under and over type break action guns. So there we go, just got extractors there, it's got rifle sights, solid steel receiver. The barrel is actually painted black rather than blued, and a alloy trigger guard, and what looks like probably beechwood stock. Alright, if we get some light in the right spot and we look in these firing pin holes, you can actually see that you can see the end of the shotgun pin, but you can see the 22 one is not there. The other thing I noticed about this is that 22 firing pin hole is actually quite battered. It's actually, when you feel it, it's actually raised, so I think the actual tip's broken off the pin and it's probably been sitting in there bashing sideways or whatever. So I'll probably just dress that with a file before I put it back together. The other thing I will do is I'll probably, when I make this pin, I'll actually make it a little bit oversized, and I'll try to get it, because if I make it to the same size as the other pin, I suspect it's going to be too small in the hole. Now if you look at the way this is designed, I'll just get this over here. So I've got the hammer back so you can see both the firing pins. Get some light on there. See both the firing pins. You can see the shotgun one's very dirty in there. I'm going to pull the whole thing apart eventually and clean it, but there's the back of the top pin. Alright, so I just started the screw using both. I wanted to hold the gun tight with one hand and use the other screw, but anyway, the screw's coming out there now. You can see it's all got a lot of corrosion and dirt coming out with the screw. Now one thing I'm going to do with this screw is I'm going to measure the thread, because I'll be interested to know whether this is, if it's a dead copy of a Savage Model 24, they may have just copied everything, in which case this would be an imperial thread. But like a lot of European, let's see, it's like a little, where are we here? It's a threaded rod. It's a rod with the thread, so the rod obviously goes right down into the firing pin. So we'll put that over there. Now what we've got to do is I'll get a little tiny little punch, 1/16 punch. We'll put it in the firing pin hole and see what happens. Alright, so there's the pin. I just got it out, so you can see the broken end of it. It's actually just broken right where the thin bit goes, and then you can see it has this this flat part, which is where that pin obviously just holds it, so the pin can go forward and back, but it can't come right out. So that should be reasonably easy to replicate, I think. Now there should be a spring, according to my information. There should be a spring in here. So let's just have a look and see what we can see. It's hard to work out where the camera is on these phones. Actually, I think I can see it in there. See the spring in there? And let's have a look. I'll see if I can both film and get it out at the same time. One thing it's worth getting if you're doing gunsmithing work, I use these all the time, is a little pair of medical hemostats, because there's a multitude of things. There it is. Where is it? There it is. There's the spring. It's a very spindly little spring, but yeah, it's just a return spring. All right, so there's my lathe. So the next job is going to be to make the new firing pin. So I'll just put the gun down there for a second. Now we obviously need to get the right sort of steel for this. Now I've got a theory about Spanish guns. I actually have a side-by-side Spanish side lock, which I bought when it was virtually unfired. It was second-hand, but virtually unfired. And both the firing pins broke on that one. My stepson has a Victor Sarasqueta double barrel box lock. His firing pins broke as well. And then we've got this Spanish copy of a Savage Model 24, and that's got a broken firing pin. So I wonder whether the Spanish gun makers use pretty crap steel for their firing pins. Anyway, what we've got here is a piece of 4140 alloy, hard alloy, pre-hardened. So it's kind of hard enough to make things like firing pins out of, but it's soft enough to actually machine. And this is what I've made all my other firing pins out of, and I fired a few hundred shots out of well, both of mine and my stepson's shotguns, and the firing pins have been fine. So this is what I'm going to make this pin out of. So so I might just set the lathe up and start doing that. Alright, so I've just carefully using a high quality, very nice flat, it's a little mini Nicholson file. I've actually just taken that bit that was sticking up there, so that feels nice and smooth now. It does seem to be a bit stretched, but with the 22, I think as long as I make the pin so it fits the hole. Now the other thing we need to do is we need to work out how long I'm going to make the actual thin firing pin part, because I don't have the original part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the fragment of the pin back in the hole, and then I'll work out how long the pin has to be to come out the hole, work out the protrusion, add a little bit extra to that, and I'll work out a length for the pin. I've put the firing pin back in there without its little spring, and I'm just using this bit of brass to being held by the hammer. I've let the hammer down, so that's actually holding the pin tight. So I can now somehow measure that depth from the face of that hole to the firing pin. So put that in the hole. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a black felt marker, and I'm going to actually mark that pin punch, but I won't film it because I don't have enough hands to do it. So you can see I've got a black mark on the pin there, so that's actually the distance from the broken firing pin to the breech face. Now I'm going to have to allow a little bit for this spring, and then I have to allow for firing pin protrusion, so I'll probably go about 2 mils more than that, I think, for a start, and then I can always fire back from there. Alright, so I've got this pretty close now, so I'm just going to see how this goes. So that actually goes all the way into there, but still a bit tight, so I just need to take a few of those machining marks off the off this, and it should then slide in nicely. So I'll just do that now. Alright, so when I measure the diameter of that, it's actually 0.2487, which is close enough to 0.25. That's just suggesting to me that they've probably followed the Savage Model 24 general plan, because they Savage Model 24 firing pins, I wouldn't be surprised, are made out of 1/4 inch rod, which of course is 2.25. You can see the end of this firing pin is kind of a bit battered, whether it's broken off or it's been hitting the front of the hole. You can see it's got a lip that's sticking out. So this, yeah, it's clear to me that this is sort of made out of steel that's a bit too soft. And you can see the back there where the hammer's been hitting it, it's a bit kind of battered as well. Looking at the design where it's got that slight angled bevel on the back, I think I'll try to reproduce that, because it may be important because of the way that little hammer selector thing on the hammer hits. It may be important to have it shaped so that if it doesn't hit directly dead center, it kind of glances off that edge or something. So I'm going to try to cut that angle. I'll have to actually try to measure that angle accurately so I can set up the headstock of my lathe to actually cut that angle. But anyway, we'll do that in a minute. Alright, so we should be getting pretty close now. I'll just put the phone down and I'll just measure this. Alright, so typical, I kind of went a bit past, we're on about 0.2486 there. No, 0.2476. So we're almost exactly the same diameter as actually the other one, as the original thing. So so that should be good. So I'll cut that off now. Alright, there we go. So we've made our rough firing pin there. So it's a bit over length, which is always worth making it a bit longer. You can always file it shorter, but you can't make them longer. Now I'll just test that in the gun before I go any further. Alright, so I've got that in the gun, so you can see the back of it sticking out there. And there it is protruding, so we've got a fair bit of protrusion. So I've basically got 3 more steps I have to do on this firing pin. I have to adjust firing pin protrusion. I have to cut the back of the firing pin back to the appropriate length, and also put that bit of a bevel on it. And then once I've got the firing pin perfect, and also being a rim fire, I'll probably work out where it's hitting on the rim and maybe file the tip of the point so that it's sort of like a bit of a long thin rectangle striking surface. And then last thing is I have to actually cut that slot in the side. That'll have to be done by hand with a Dremel tool. But we'll get everything else going first, and then hope we don't bugger up the last bit. Alright, so I've got the firing pin in there now. Oops. With its spring, so you can see. Alright, so I've put the brass rod in there now, so the spring of the hammer is holding the firing pin forward. And you can see that I've actually just marked the firing pin with some black pen to sort of show about where I I want the protrusion to be, or how far to file it back. Now, one thing with 22 rim, or with rimfire cases, not so important with centerfire, because I mean, you have to be really too long to actually pierce a primer, and if it's, you know, you don't want it too short because it might misfire. But with a 22 rim fire, it's actually quite important to get your firing pin protrusion pretty right, because obviously, again, if it's too short, you'll have misfires. But if it's too long, it means that if it's ever dry fired, which I avoid, but it does happen, it can go forward and hit the edge of the chamber, and it can actually peen the chamber such that you can't actually then chamber a cartridge. So that's why it's important to try to get it as close as possible to perfect. Filing the end of this just to get it back to the same length as the other one. So if we look at the angle on this firing pin, it's around the 45 degree mark, 45 to 50 degrees. So so I'll just set the lathe up, and we'll just cut those bevels on the back of the pin. All right, so I've turned the headstock around here now to, you can't actually see the marks, but it's actually marked in degrees around the bottom here. So I've got it on 45 degrees. So I'm just going to cut those little shoulders on the back of the firing pin to try to make it pretty much the same design as the original one. Alright, so basically we've got the dimensions of the pin, how we want them, and now the only two jobs to do are to cut that slot in the side of the pin using the Dremel tool. That's where the firing pin retainer engages to stop it going too far in or too far out. And then the last operation we'll do is to just grind the tip of the pin a little bit to get it into the shape of a rimfire firing pin. Now I'm doing that last because I obviously want the, where are we? I want the orientation of the tip of that pin to be a certain way in relation to that slot. So I've got to cut the slot first, and then I'll do the tip of the pin, and then that'll be it. Right, so we've got that set up. So if we look at this old firing pin, the slot goes even this slot, look at it, it's not really even cut very straight, so it's not really that important. All it does is keeps the firing pin in place, but it goes not quite halfway through. So I've got this gripped about halfway down its diameter in my little vise, so I shouldn't be able to cut too far. If I cut down to so I'm almost hitting the vise, and then I'll just cut the slot. I'll go not quite far enough, and then I can finish it off with a file. All right, there we go. That firing pin is finished as far as I can see. It's time. See, what I've done is actually cut a little, so I've got a little triangular, rectangular bit on the end, like most rimfire rifles, and I've got that on the same angle as the notch in the firing pin, because it actually hits at the base of the rim, so it'll be up and down against the rim. So I'm going to put it back in the gun now. We'll give it a try. Right, so there's the back of the firing pin. As you can see, it's been held out by the little spring. I'm going to take this out again and put a bit of grease in and stuff. I just put it all together just to check the protrusion and see, make sure it was firing and everything. I see there's also some file marks on the back of that, so I'll smooth that out as well. But yeah, that looks pretty good, really. Now when I put the the piece of brass rod in here. I'll do that again. Right, you can see with the brass in there, we've just got, I don't know if you'll be able to see the protrusion there. So we've got a little bit of protrusion there. And you can see it's not quite, I tried to get that horizontal compared to the slot. It's not quite exactly horizontal, but it's pretty close. So if I take that out, that bit of rod, and then drop the hammer. So now that the hammer's back, I've got it so that the pin is actually below the level of that surface. Now when I first did it, it was actually just proud by probably about 1/4 mil, so I just kept getting it out, having it out with the brass rod, filing it and putting it back in till so it's virtually flush with the surface now. Now you'll note that, as I said, I've filed that pin so that so it's actually sort of horizontal. The little flat bit it's off by a couple of degrees, but it's pretty close. The reason I did that is because it sits at the bottom of the rim of the 22 cartridge, and obviously you need to hit the rim, and you can get in cheap 22 cartridges, especially you can get ones where you get a misfire because a little bit of the rim doesn't have adequate priming compound. You probably experienced that. You know, you pull it out, turn it around a little bit, put it back in, and it'll usually fire the second time. So what I'm trying to do here is actually have this so it's parallel with the rim, so it's actually crushing a larger section of the rim than it otherwise would. If it was at 90 degrees, it would be crushing a smaller section. So we'll see how that works. So now what I've got to do is I'll pull some cartridges and get some primed cases, and we'll give them a go. Alright, so what I've done is I've got 5 different brands of 22 ammo, and I've pulled 1 bullet from each one. So I've got 5 different primed cases. So we'll just test this and see if it fires all the primed cases okay. I've got a Winchester T22, there's a Remington high velocity, there's a Federal standard velocity, there's a Ely Club, and there's an old, very old, that old one you can see amongst them. It's probably a 60-year-old ICI, Aussie made cartridge. This is an Ely Club. Well, that one fired alright. So as you can see, I've got the dent is kind of parallel with the base of the cartridge. Righto, this is the old ICI. This is probably 60 years old, this case. Be interesting to see if this one works. That one fired. There we go. Again, you can sort of see the dent is parallel with the rim of the case, which is what I was sort of aiming for. Okay, this is a Federal standard velocity. I shoot a lot of these, and you don't tend to get misfires with these. That fired. We're getting a nice smell of priming compound in the room here. There we go. There's the dent on the rim. This is a Winchester T22. That fired. This one is a Remington. Now that, I think that actually, it didn't, at first I thought it didn't fire, but I think it did. it's just much quieter than all the others. Oh yeah, look, there's smoke. There's actually smoke in that case. So I'm pretty happy with that. Basically that means that with all those 5 brands of ammo it worked fine. The job's done, it's all fixed. So I am going to, I won't bother filming it, but what I'll do in a minute is I'll take that firing pin out again. I might get a cotton tip with some solvent and give that firing pin hole a good clean out, try to get all the old grease and dirt and crap out of it. And I'll smooth the back of the firing pin where I filed it, just get the file marks off, make it nice and shiny. And I'll put it back in and it'll be all done. Alright, so I've taken this out, I've cleaned the firing pin hole in the gun, I've kind of polished up the back of this. So I'm just going to just do a cold blue on it just to make it look a bit fancier. Alright, there we go. Put a bit of blue on it. So it's mainly the bit that sticks out the back. That'll give a little bit of corrosion resistance. So now I'll put it all back together again. Alright, so the job's completed now. I cleaned out that firing pin hole, polished the back of the pin, I've cold blued it. There we go. So it's all ready to go. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please push the like button, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.